I'm live. I'm reading A Lot to Remember, a lot being a part of France, and Joan Marshall Grant used to visit it many times in her life. She dedicated it to Charles and Denys for A Lot to Remember. We are here in chapter 18. She talks about the history of France as well and her memories. Chapter 18 is entitled To All Good Things. Only the most myopic visitor could fail to recognize why Saint-Cirque-la-Popie has often been called the most beautiful village in France. But I might have seen it through the admiring eyes of a stranger instead of with insight, unless Madame Rocher had decided that we belonged there. So except for the interlude at Saint-Céré, the all bonnes choses was our home until the middle of September, when we had to return to England because Charles' mother, in her 90th year, had had a stroke. Our other mentor was George Cabochot, whose fierce independence usually permitted him to recognize the existence of tourists only when he put on a cap-blazoned guide to conduct the coachload which arrived for a brief hour twice a week on their way to Pêche-Mallet and Roc-Amadou. This robustly piratical character, who before he was taken prisoner by the Nazis had implemented many ingenious marquis schemes to harass them, decided that we were his cousins and should be accepted as such. George found it surprising that we could not help him to pinpoint our exact relationship, for he not only knew the history of his family since they had settled in La Popie, a mere 5 centuries, but detailed records of the previous 200 years at Cheshuit, now part of Cahors, when the English sap in his tree had stemmed from a knight in the Plantagenet army. He told me rather apologetically that although he knew his ancestors had come to Cajon from the Pyrenees, the records prior to the 12th century were fragmentary, but that in those mountains there were still some of our cousins with whom he could put me in touch. The care he and Madame Rocher took of us is exemplified by our homecoming after one of our few disappointing meals. As that bar sinister on the gastronomic escutcheon of the lot has now changed hand, I will not disclose its locale, but these are only 2 accurate notes made the same evening. It is a pretty village and might be an ideal place for people with children who don't want to be worried by the thought of them falling over the cliff. I must remember to mention the remarkably good manners of La Popie children. Is this due to the fact that only the ones who accept kindly advice survive long enough to breed? Hotel looks pleasant, although geraniums outside need watering, very healthy amaryllis lilies in pots on the bar, and owner fetches a jug of water when I tell him that the flowers I have been collecting would also like a drink. Dinner is deplorable, and this cannot just be an off day, as 4 other couples who are en pension plod through it without protest. Soup seems to be river water muddy, with a few shreds of carrot and dash of grease. Fish, unidentifiable, is bones and blotting paper, so give it to a pair of charming cats, who have remarkable green eyes with black rims to the eyelids. Country sausage so good at La Popie is here unedible. Charles takes a bite and exclaims, "That stung. Luckily, No one understands English. The vin compris is nearly undrinkable, but we swallow some of it to foil the waitress, who is hovering near, convinced that we shall be driven to buy a bottle of something better. To show we can't be bullied, we'll wait for coffee and digestif until we got home. Madame Rocher greeted us like a nanny who fears her children had been eaten by bears. So I asked her if the hotel had telephoned to say that we would not be back for dinner. She admitted that this had been done, but it was not you who spoke to me, so how could I warn you? Either you are starving or else you will suffer agonies during the night. The cook there is a pustule on the face of France. Worse, she is a living insult to the cuisine of the lot. I insist that you tell me in detail what she gave you. I touched lightly on the soup. Madame Rocher cast up her eyes in horror. I described the fish. Oh, those poor cats, she cried, and then decided not to waste her sympathy. Doubtless they are common cats, and such creatures survive even by scavenging from dustbins. Then what did she give you? Something that described itself on the menu as saucisson de champagne. Surely the good God warned you not to touch it. I reassured her. I had been spared. Charles had eaten no more than a small mouthful, and his interior was robust. Describe the sausage, she demanded. To do it justice, I must use his exact words, which he pronounced loudly and clearly so that all could hear. I paused, wondering whether I would be too dishonest not to admit he had spoken in English, and decided that my duty was to my audience. Tell me, she urged. Now tell me exactly what he said. He spared a fragment on his fork. He stared at it as a scientist stares into his microscope. Then he announced his opinion. Never before have I been offered what appears to be merde de chauve-souris. Merde de chauve-souris? Oh, what an exquisite discerning description of that slattern's cooking. Shouting with laughter, she swept us into the kitchen, where the table was piled high with lime branches, which George was stripping to make lime flower tea. Saucisse merde de chauve or saucisse is what they were given, she exulted. George's was equally delighted. La Popie had scored a goal against the ungodly, and we were the umpires who had announced the victory. Suddenly, remembering the speed and range of the Bourgeois grapevine, I began to feel a little guilty. Is it unfair to judge a hotel by a single meal? And anyway, I was trying to be funny. In England, there are hundreds of hotels where they serve meals even more dreadful. And why, Madame Rocher thundered, why, even in France, is good food becoming each day more difficult to find? It is because people allow themselves to be bullied, to accept any filth they are given. Are we Germans that we permit little Hitlers to rule our kitchens? She turned to George. It's not true. I said that if they came back and told us that they had a passable dinner, I should know. They felt it necessary to lie to me, Madame Rocher, and this would have made it very difficult neither to lose my temper nor to weep. Did I not say that, George? George beamed at us. This is exactly what she said. Not once, but many times, and I told her that she gave herself needless anxiety. To conceal her emotion, Madame Rocher flung open the refrigerator and rummaged among its crowded shelves for a tin of her finest pâté de foie gras. Then she rushed into the dining room and from the top shelf of the lovely walnut cupboard took down a cherished bottle of 50-year-old Armagnac. There are only 4 bottles of this left, she said, stroking the one she held, as though it were the cheek of a favorite grandchild. I never sell even a glass. for it is too fine to be drunk, except as a gift. She poured libations into 4 glasses. There are very few of us left, she said gently. Tonight we 4 will share a little supper together, for when your work is to share your roof with strangers, it is a happy thing to find yourself at home among friends. So that was the chapter 18. Chapter 19 is Terror by Night. And today is the 8th of November.